Looking back, I feel as if gradually, after I got to Wales, I became a sort of feral human. Uh, it wasn't that I wasn't living in civilization, it was that I was living away from my civilization. And I have to say, uh, as will be obvious from my videos, that my family was never particularly civilized to begin with. Um, it did seem as if I was surviving on my own in a wilderness, and um, everything I thought I had known fell away bit by bit, especially writing the book that I was writing about my father. At that time, I didn't really include my mother. I didn't consider her much of a mystery. And she wasn't a murderer, and she hadn't abused me sexually. I didn't even think about the way she treated me as emotional abuse at the time. And up to the point, physical abuse, neglect. But all of that kind of fell away. I mean, it's a dozen years since I sat down and played a game of Scrabble with anyone. I have occasionally been a guest in people's houses, but very rarely. Sat down to a meal with anyone else. Rare. Been to cinema, anything ordinary. Any kind of social activity. Very rare since I got to Wales. Going into other people's homes, them coming to mine, and especially doing the work that I was doing, it was not possible for them to come into mine. The two just didn't gel. I did come close. Well, I did make friends with a married couple in Godric, and they were in fact from Northumberland, Newcastle on Tyne, whatever. And despite the fact that they were a married couple, they were lonely. Which I think vindicates me a little that they weren't able to socialize either, although they were very friendly people. And I used to go to their house quite a bit at one time. Must have been around 2004. Yeah, must have been. Yeah, I had floss, and it was before I'd begun the work I was doing. So between sort of September 2004 and August 2005. And their house was absolutely pristine. And mine did me for my needs, but it was I hadn't had a chance to decorate it or anything like that. It fell into my lap and I grabbed it. And you don't have much time to think about these things. You say yes or you say no, and if you've got to make a snap decision. I thought it was perfect for me, but I thought I just had this thing about I can't have them back to my place. It's not good enough. Which was stupid because in the end they sort of drifted away. And hindsight is not always a good thing. I think they felt I didn't want to know them, really. I didn't want to be friends with them. I should have just said, look, my place is a tip compared to yours, but you're welcome in. It wasn't a tip, it was just basic. But I do think it says something that as a married couple they were lonely and couldn't quite fit in. And you couldn't really, because although people were friendly, there. They were friendly. Everyone had known everyone else since birth. Most people were related. They were all related to each other. They were, as one guy put it, well, he said they're inbred. These were his exact words, and he lived there. And it was a different culture. It was a culture that was at least 50 years behind that of Southampton, which at first I thought was a good thing. But then when I went to the working men's club and found myself shepherded into the ladies' corner, I did feel as I'd stepped way, way, way back in time. And it was a gradual process of being alone, except for my dog. And dogs are not going to be... she was the loveliest dog in the world, but as someone to keep you on the straight and narrow, forget it. Dogs don't have morals. They don't. Not by human standards. And when, in November 2004, by which time I'd been gone nearly a year, and hadn't seen either of my daughters for 2 years, when my daughter phoned and said, do you want to see your grandchildren? I've already said, of course, the answer was yes, but by then I had to kennel my dog to go there as well as the train fare and as well as B&B, etc., etc. And the really weird thing was that, as I say, it was November 2004, and in that month, a male friend who had put me up in Southampton over the previous year, occasionally had put me up, vanished off the face of the earth. And I do mean that, literally. I went to where he used to live, and he had gone. Simple as. And nobody seemed quite sure where. So he couldn't put me up anymore, he wasn't there, but it was the timing of the thing. Gordon Grigg fell into my lap too damned easily. Everything fell into place, just bang, bang, bang. There were no difficulties at all. It was the place that I wanted. It was offered to me. I accepted it. I was able to get the removal money. It was too easy. And that happened on 2 other occasions. And given the life that I've led, I almost feel as if it was arranged for me. Not necessarily with good intentions, but to get me out of the way. I was too damned inquisitive. I'd gone to Fiona's inquest, and now I was looking for Karen Ann, my half-sister. And I felt all along that Karen was, in fact, the key to everything. And it turned out that that was absolutely 100% the case. She was. I don't think I've quite explained, really. But until I found her death entry and inquest notes, nothing fell into place. It was just an autobiography without any explanations as to who had done what or why. Or any of the other characters who were involved. Not many of them anyway. I hadn't found those. So anyway, I've said that I immediately found it financially difficult to see my daughter and grandkids, and that 9 months later I entered the work that I did in order to pay for those trips, and didn't expect to earn any more than enough to pay for those trips. But I do feel, and now feeling quite nostalgic about leaving Wales. Very, very nostalgic, actually. I think about the wildness of it. And in a way that it was the only time in my life that it was free. Arguably a little too free. I could do anything I wanted. Just about anything I wanted. And that's also not necessarily a good thing, but it feels like it at the time. There's just nothing to hold me back. Without friends whose opinions I cared about, or family here, it was do as I please, more or less. More or less. It's just lucky that I wasn't like my father and didn't want to do the kinds of things that he did. But it was a kind of feral state. I lived with a dog. And she was a lovely, sweet, good-natured dog. The absolute, not meaning any disrespect to Danny, the absolute perfect dog for me. But if you're a hermit living with a dog, you're not going to really conform to the standards you used to. Not as a total hermit. In fact, I'd never had more self-confidence in my entire life. And all of a sudden, I was regarded as a competent person, a confident person. If you want things done, get Sue to do it. I couldn't believe my ears. I thought nothing like I've ever been before or been described as before. But all of a sudden, if there was a problem, I had a solution to it. I could solve any problem. There was always a way. In 2009, actually 2008, it all began to fall apart. Simply because there were problems placing my advert. I had to place the advert once a month, and the newspaper was falling apart. It wasn't doing the job right. I was paying for ads and they weren't going in, and so on and so forth. And of course, if the ads don't go in, you don't get the work. Simple as. A lot of things started to fall apart in 2008. 2009, exactly the same thing happened as had happened with Godric Craig. I applied for a place in Southampton and was immediately offered it. And also, of course, the removal money was there. Nothing to stop me going, except a sense of unfinished business. And perhaps a few other things. I must admit, I was going to have to move in an awful hurry without time to decorate again, and the walls of the bedroom were blood red. I thought, my God, I can't sleep in a bedroom that looks as if it's been splashed with blood. And for some reason, somebody had seen fit to put French windows in the bedroom, and you could step straight through those into a communal garden. Therefore, the minute you drew back your bedroom curtains, anyone in the garden could see in. And I wouldn't have liked that. In fact, I would have hated that. My bedroom curtains would have been closed permanently. Other than that, it was perfect. And again, extremely easy. Bang, 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 I could just go. I decided before I left to go back to the place where I had begun my research, which was Portsmouth Library. I mean, while I was in Southampton, this is. Sorting the details there. And very unfortunately, while I was doing my little bit of research in Portsmouth Library, sort of going back over old ground, well, not going back over old ground, going back to the beginning, they had one of these TVs in the square. The first time I saw one of those was in Swansea. These gigantic TVs that broadcast in public. And lo and behold, what was on it but all my favourite coastal spots in Wales. All the beauty of that. And that kind of hit me wrenching at my heart. And most of all, I just hadn't finished what I wanted to do. So that was the summer of 2009, and I thought, okay, I'm going to delay it slightly. And I went to London several times. So this time I'm going to where it all happened. And found Karen, talked to the neighbours, talked to Karen's neighbours, talked to her mother's neighbours. I've talked about this. Found Karen's death entry. God only knows how I'd missed it before. Although I couldn't have known that I could have known that her surname had been changed to Montgomery. If only I'd known that the Montgomery that her mother married had been living with them since Karen was 2. On paper, I mean, she married him when Karen would have been 26, so I didn't see why the hell Karen should have his surname. And I still don't understand why, just to be on the safe side, I didn't check out a death under the name of Karen Ann Montgomery instead of Karen Ann Oakley. I would have thought I would have done that just to be on the safe side. But the minute I went to the microfiche at Kew, there was the death entry. And that, of course, took me to the inquest notes on microfilm. And that, of course, gave me names of everyone involved in the crash. And that meant electoral rolls to find out about them. So a lot of that summer, back and forth to London. And to cut a long story short, I missed my opportunity going back to Southampton, and it's done me absolutely no good whatsoever, because everything that I found out is for nothing. Everything I found out is for nothing. Lots and lots of work, lots and lots of expense, and a missed opportunity to go home 7 years ago. With Flossie, who, to be frank, might still be alive if I had gone at that time. I think all the moving around that we did very much took its toll on her as she got older and older. Among other things, and the dreadful landlords and landladies and their henchmen, I think also harmed Flossie. Yeah, going in when I wasn't there and stuff like that, and she was there sometimes. My life was divided between walking the dog, walking Floss, writing, research, and working. A sort of very, very full life. Lived at what some people would think of as opposite ends of the scale. On the one hand, I was a sex worker, and on the other hand, I was doing very intensive research, which would have easily been was on postgraduate level, because I am a postgraduate, and I was doing a master's degree at one point. So I know how to do my research. What I don't know is where a lot of my intuition and my hunches came from, because they all came true. They all turned out to be right. Every single one of them. And there were a lot. Such as, for example, a man called Dennis Oakley, who I figured out right away was connected to my father. And I now, if I were to retrace my steps and say, how the hell did I know? I'm really not quite sure. But I was right. And a lot of things like that. But anyway, then I wound up back in Aberystwyth, where I'd also done a lot of my research at the National Library there. Lots still to be done, and I was not content to go and settle back home until I had finished what I'd begun. I was absolutely driven, totally driven. And in fact, I've just watched, for the second time, a documentary about a man called Paul Fronczak, except that's not his real name, but whatever. And there are similarities that he is driven to find out who he is, who he really is, who his parents are, etc. And it's taken over his whole life. And my research didn't take over my whole life. I mean, Floss and I often walked about 10 miles a day. But there were also full days of research and all my evenings writing, and working between that. By 2009, not much work. Well, partly because of the adverts falling through, and partly because I was that much older than when I began. I was 55 by then. "23 minutes.